Dad, I know Neptune's wrong, but I think it looks better my way. That's the text message on Marcus Cole's phone as he walks down Sycamore Drive at 4:12 on a Sunday afternoon in August. And he reads it 3 times because his 9-year-old daughter has a way of making him stop and actually think about what she's saying instead of just nodding and moving on. The message came with a photograph, a papier-mâché model of the solar system, each planet suspended from a coat hanger structure with fishing line, and Neptune is definitely not the right shade of blue. It's too purple, too bright, too Layla. She ran out of the correct blue paint halfway through and improvised, mixed in some violet, decided it looked better that way, and now she's asking him to validate the choice through text message from the house of her Aunt Carmen on Sycamore Drive, where Diana took her this morning while Marcus played in a charity golf tournament at Stone Creek Golf Club. He responds with 3 heart emojis and a thumbs up, because Neptune being the wrong shade is better than Neptune being the right shade. And that's the kind of thing his 9-year-old already understands better than most people understand it at 30. Marcus is 56 blocks from Stone Creek. He walked 6 of them already. 3 more to go before he reaches Carmen's house, before he sees Diana and Layla and the purple Neptune in person. His doctor said walking was good for his blood pressure. Diana said the same thing, and when both his doctor and his wife agree on something. Marcus has learned to listen. He's 38 years old. He's been on the Atlanta Police Department for 15 years. He's been in internal affairs for 3 years, which means he's been reading complaint files for 3 years, which means he's been carrying around the specific weight of what people write down when the system fails them. That weight adds up. The walking is supposed to help. The afternoon is humid in that Sunday way that makes the trees seem louder than they should be. Sycamore Drive is a corridor street, the kind that connects the lower-income neighborhoods south of the county line to the residential blocks north. And for the first few blocks, it's still mixed. Small houses with big yards, a corner bodega, a church parking lot with the sign out front announcing a service time. Marcus has walked this route twice before, both times with Diana, both times moving through it without thinking about what it meant to move through it. Now he's thinking about Neptune and his daughter's specific gift for being right in a way that's hard to argue with, even when the argument is supposed to be about paint color. He joined the Atlanta Police Department when he was 23 because he believed in something at 23 that he still believes in at 38, which is that having people on the inside who understand both sides of the badge might change things. He spent 6 years in patrol in neighborhoods where he recognized half the people he was supposed to arrest, men who lived 1 block over from him, women who had graduated from his high school 2 years ahead of him, kids who weren't kids anymore but weren't adults either, caught in that space where you become a statistic if you're not careful. He made 73 arrests in those 6 years. He knew the circumstances of every single one. He still thinks about specific faces, not names. He's learned not to memorize names. It makes everything harder, but specific faces of people he had to take down, had to read rights to, had to put in cars while their mothers or their wives or their own kids watched from porches. 3 years in homicide, that was different. That was about the dead, about the investigation, about the mathematics of violence. He worked 47 cases. 23 resulted in convictions. He remembers those numbers precisely because the numbers are the only thing that makes sense about murder. Everything else is just the debris of choice and circumstance. In homicide, you don't have to wonder if you're doing the right thing. The right thing and the wrong thing are already separated by the fact that someone is dead. Then he made detective at 33 and spent 2 years in general investigations before the opportunity opened up in internal affairs. IA is the job where nobody likes you. IA is the job where every cop in every locker room in the department goes quiet the moment you walk in. IA is the job where you read other people's mistakes and bad decisions and calculated choices, and you document them, and you file them, and sometimes, something comes of that documentation. Most of the time, nothing does. The files stack up. The template language gets used again and again. The complaints get closed. Marcus moved to IA because he thought that being on the inside, being someone who understood what it meant to wear the badge, might let him be effective at something that seemed broken beyond his ability to fix it. He was wrong about that in ways he's still measuring. But he wasn't wrong about understanding why it mattered to try. 15 years on the force means he knows how the whole thing works. He understands the mathematics of a department. He understands the specific weight of a shield and the specific feeling of having that shield protect you even when it shouldn't, even when you do something that should have consequences, and the consequence never comes because there's a template language for everything, and the template language can be manipulated, and the people manipulating it have been doing it longer than you've been breathing. He's thinking about all of this as he walks down Sycamore Drive, which is a mistake because he's supposed to be thinking about Neptune and Layla and whether 3 more blocks is worth it when the heat is this thick. He's off duty. His service weapon is at home in the safe. His IA badge is in his inside jacket pocket. He carries it everywhere because you never know when you're going to see something that needs documenting. But he's not expecting to see anything today except Carmen's porch and Layla showing him the purple Neptune in person. He doesn't know yet that Officer Boyd Calloway is parked 600 yards ahead of him, at the corner of Sycamore Drive and 12th Street, sitting in Unit 408, waiting for someone to walk through. He doesn't know that Calloway has been parked in that exact location for 25 minutes already. He doesn't know that this is not Calloway's first time being parked in this location on this street, and it won't be his last. He doesn't know that Calloway has been working this corridor for 7 years, has made stops on Sycamore Drive dozens of times, and has never, not once, faced any consequences for any of them. What Marcus doesn't know is going to hit him in 2 minutes. But what Marcus does know is that he made a promise to himself when he joined IA that he wouldn't become someone who looked away. He promised himself that he would read every file, even the ones that came with template language. He promised himself that he would remember that every closed complaint represented someone who had been failed, and that the failure was the point. The system was working exactly the way it was designed to work, which was to protect the people with badges. 15 years of reading those files. 15 years of knowing that the system was rotating through the same violations again and again. 15 years of watching the template language do its work, and in 15 years, Marcus had learned something that maybe sounds cynical, but is actually the most honest thing he understands. The system doesn't fail, it performs. It does exactly what it's built to do. He keeps walking toward Carmen's house. 3 more blocks. Neptune is the wrong shade of blue, and that's what his daughter has decided is better, and he's going to tell her she's right. He's still thinking about the promise he made to himself about not looking away when Calloway pulls out from his parking spot and starts driving toward him. The officer's name is Boyd Calloway, and the first thing you need to understand about him is that he's not a monster. He's not someone who wakes up in the morning with violence in his heart or hatred as his guiding philosophy. He's a man who grew up in Millhaven, who has worked for the Millhaven Police Department for 17 years, who knows the geography of the place like a man knows a place he's decided belongs to him. He polices like he owns it, and for 17 years, nobody has told him that's wrong. His personnel file is 143 pages long. Marcus has read it 3 times now. each time looking for the moment where things should have broken differently. The file begins with his academy graduation and moves through his career chronologically: commendations for traffic enforcement, citations for response time, evaluations that describe him as reliable and dedicated. The file also contains 11 excessive force complaints spanning 9 years, involving 10 Black and Hispanic subjects. Every single one is closed. Every single one uses language so similar it reads from a template, because it was from a template. The language is, the actions of Officer Calloway were consistent with departmental policy and the scope of his authority as a law enforcement officer. No disciplinary action is warranted. 6 of those complaints were processed personally by Captain Glenn Harmon, Calloway's supervisor. Harmon's signature appears on forms approving the closure with the same template language. The same specific phrase about consistency with policy. The same 11 words that mean, we looked at this and we decided it doesn't matter. What Marcus's investigation will eventually reveal is that Calloway had a specific pattern. He worked Sycamore Drive. He worked it aggressively. He made stops of people, mostly Black men, mostly young, mostly walking on a street that connected their neighborhood to a neighborhood they were less likely to belong to. 7 years of stops, 7 years of Sycamore Drive, 7 years of never being disciplined for any of it. But Marcus doesn't know all of that yet. What he knows right now is that someone has sent him an anonymous package. The package arrives at the Atlanta Police Department's Internal Affairs Office on a Tuesday morning in September, 3 weeks after Marcus gets hit with a golf club on Sycamore Drive by a man he doesn't yet know the name of. The package is unmarked. It contains a letter and a printout of GPS data. The letter is unsigned. It says, "You deserve to know what he was doing before you showed up." The GPS data is from Unit 408, the unit that Officer Boyd Calloway was driving. The data shows timestamps and coordinates going back 7 months. The data shows that on August 15th, the day Marcus was hit, Calloway parked at the corner of Sycamore Drive and 12th Street at 3:47 p.m. The data shows that Calloway sat there. The data shows that at 4:12 p.m. something moved at that location. The data shows that Calloway was stationary for 25 minutes before anything else happened at that spot. The data shows that he was not conducting a routine patrol. The data shows that he was waiting. Marcus sits in his office with the GPS printout in front of him, and he thinks about what it means to wait somewhere for 25 minutes. It means you're expecting something. It means you've decided this is where the thing you're looking for will appear. It means you've made a calculation about what will pass through this specific geography. He calls in Sarah Mitchell, the technical analyst from the GPS unit at the department. Sarah comes into his office and looks at the data, and she's already starting to shake her head before she even sits down. "This is going to be a problem," she says. "How much of a problem?" "The kind where I'm not supposed to be showing you this," she says. "But someone got it to you anyway, and now I'm supposed to pretend I don't know how." She points at the screen. She shows him the timestamps. She shows him the pattern. "Look at the periodicity," she says. "These aren't random days. These are consistent. You see Thursday. You see Saturday. Summer months. You see this street. You see the same corner." "How many times?" She pulls up a different file. 32 unlogged appearances, she says. "That means he parked there, and the GPS data shows he was stationary, and the activity log for that shift shows him conducting mobile patrol. It doesn't match. The log says one thing, and the GPS says another. Which one is the truth?" "The GPS is the truth," Sarah says. "The log is whatever Calloway wrote at the end of his shift." Marcus leans back in his chair. He's been in IA for 3 years. He's read hundreds of files. He knows how this works. He knows that when a log doesn't match the data, what you're looking at is evidence of either incompetence or intention, and he's learned that intention is always the safer assumption. Intention is easier to pursue. I need everything, he says. Every appearance, every date, every duration. You're going to want to talk to someone else about what this means, Sarah says. You're going to want to cross-reference these dates and locations with incident reports. You're going to want to know if there were stops made near those coordinates on those dates. Were there? I've been looking at this for 2 hours since I got it this morning, Sarah says. I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to say that the department's records on those stops are incomplete. Marcus doesn't know it yet, but what Sarah has just told him is that 32 times. Officer Boyd Calloway parked on Sycamore Drive and waited for something to move, and 32 times something moved. And somewhere in those 32 times is the evidence of a pattern that goes back years. Somewhere in those 32 times are people who were stopped and questioned and maybe searched and maybe arrested or maybe just scared. And their records, if records even exist, are written in language that looks like template language because it is template language. He sits with Sarah for 2 more hours. They cross-reference dates. They look at incident reports. They find 11 stops on Sycamore Drive where Officer Calloway was either the primary officer or the assisting officer in the 6 months between March and August of that year. 5 of those stops resulted in arrests. 4 resulted in citations. 2 were documented as routine inquiry with no apparent resolution. The names of the people stopped are David Marsh, age 24, arrested for possession with intent to distribute. Charges later dropped due to illegality of the stop. James Patterson, age 19, cited for jaywalking. Citation was paid. Marcus Cole, age 38, Internal Affairs Division, attacked with a golf club and transported to County General Hospital with injuries to his left shoulder and ribs. Marcus looks at the list. He looks at his own name on it. He looks at the 8 other names, and he understands that they represent something he's been theorizing about for 15 years, but has never been able to document this clearly before. A pattern of targeted stopping based on where people were walking and what Calloway believed about where they should be. We need to find the actual people, Marcus says. You're going to want to handle that carefully, Sarah says. You're going to want to find them without letting Calloway know you're looking. How am I supposed to do that? That's the part where you get to be a detective instead of an administrator, Sarah says. She's right. What Marcus has just received is not a legal piece of evidence yet. What Marcus has received is a heads up from someone inside the department who has access to GPS data and the courage to pass it along anonymously. The moment Marcus makes this official, the moment he files paperwork on it, the moment he opens a formal investigation, the department knows, Calloway knows, the people who have been signing off on closing Calloway's complaints know. But right now in this moment with the data in front of him and Sarah looking at him, Marcus can go find the people on that list. Marcus can talk to them without making it official. Marcus can listen to their stories without the machinery of a formal investigation moving to protect itself. I'm going to need an update on those 8 other stops, Marcus says. It's going to take me about a week, Sarah says, and I'm going to need you to tell me why you're looking before I can tell anyone else. I'm looking because I want to know what happened to the people who walked down that street before I did, Marcus says. Sarah nods. She stands up. Then you're going to need to talk to Patricia Vargas, she says. Who's that? The woman who called 911 when Calloway was hitting you with a golf club, Sarah says. She's lived on Sycamore Drive for 34 years. She called it in the moment it happened. She saw everything. And she's been watching that street long enough to know that what happened to you wasn't the first time it happened there. The first person Marcus meets with is not Patricia Vargas. It's Officer Jason Ruiz. And Ruiz comes to him the way informants come to detectives, at night, in civilian clothes, looking like he's carrying the weight of a decision he's had to make alone. Ruiz is 28 years old. He's been with the Millhaven Police Department for 3 years. He's been partnered with Boyd Calloway for 2 of those years, which means he's been present for conversations about stops and about Sycamore Drive and about the specific calculation Calloway makes about who belongs on a street and who doesn't. Ruiz was not present for the stop on August 15th. Calloway was operating solo that afternoon, which raises questions that Marcus doesn't fully understand yet about departmental oversight of solo patrol decisions. But Ruiz has been close enough to Calloway's work to recognize what Marcus is describing when Marcus calls him and asks him to meet at a coffee shop outside of Millhaven. They sit in a booth in the back, and Ruiz doesn't order anything because he's not planning to stay long. And he says, "I know what you're looking at." Marcus doesn't answer this. He waits for Ruiz to continue. "He's been doing it for a long time," Ruiz says. "The stops, the way he works that street. I've been in the car with him when he's made some of them, and I've heard him talk about the rest. He's not shy about it. He talks like he owns the place." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because the next person," he stops. "If they don't have an IA badge like Detective Cole, if they don't have the resources to follow up, if they're just a regular person who gets stopped for walking, they're going to have nothing," Ruiz says. "And I'm not comfortable with that anymore, and I wasn't comfortable with it before, but now I'm less comfortable with it, and I've decided to stop being complicit in what I'm uncomfortable with. That's going to have consequences for you." "I know," Ruiz says. "I've already made peace with that." What Ruiz tells Marcus that night is that Calloway has made comments about Sycamore Drive being a corridor where certain people come through, and that Calloway sees his job on that street as preventing crime by preventing the movement of people he believes commit crime. Ruiz tells him that Calloway has said, word for word, that he stops people based on where they are at specific times and their correspondence to the neighborhood. Ruiz tells him that Calloway once made a stop and afterwards said that he was being proactive about people who were in the wrong part of town. "He's not subtle about it," Ruiz says. "He's not trying to hide it. He's performing it. He's explaining it like it's normal." Marcus takes notes. He doesn't record the conversation. He doesn't want Ruiz in more danger than he's already putting himself in. But he writes down the specific language Calloway used, and he asks Ruiz to repeat certain phrases so he can get the exact wording. "If you need me to say this officially," Ruiz says, "I will, but it's going to change my job situation, and I want you to know that going in, I'm going to need official statements eventually," Marcus says. "But right now, I need to understand what we're looking at. I need to know if what happened to me is part of a pattern or if it's an isolated incident." "It's a pattern," Ruiz says. "The GPS thing, that confirms it, but it's definitely a pattern. I've been in the car with him too many times not to know that." After Ruiz leaves, Marcus sits in the coffee shop and opens the GPS printout. The 32 unlogged appearances aren't random. They're clustered. They're concentrated on specific days and times. Marcus starts to map them. He creates a matrix. He assigns each appearance to a calendar, and he looks at the geography of them. What he sees is that on Thursdays, Calloway appears at that corner with unusual frequency. On Thursday afternoons, between 3 p.m. and 5 p.m., Calloway has parked at that specific location 18 times in 7 months. 18 times. That's more than once a week on average. Calloway has sat at that intersection, waiting for something to pass through, on more Thursday afternoons than he's missed them. Marcus thinks about what that means. It means Calloway has planned this. It means Calloway has studied the patterns of people who move through Sycamore Drive and has identified a time and a place where movement happens. It means Calloway has made a calculation about when and where to position himself to intercept something he's expecting. The question is, what is he expecting? Marcus pulls up the incident reports from those 18 Thursday appearances. 4 of the incidents have documentation in the system. 2 have documentation that's incomplete. 12 have no documentation at all. Just the GPS data showing Calloway was there. What that tells Marcus is that either Calloway made stops that were never reported, which would be illegal, or Calloway was positioned to make stops and nobody passed through. Or Calloway was making stops and the documentation was being handled outside of the normal reporting system. None of those are acceptable possibilities. All 3 of them are criminal. Marcus goes to Patricia Vargas's house at 9 a.m. on a Saturday morning, and she answers the door like she's been expecting him, even though he didn't call ahead. Patricia is 71 years old. She's lived on Sycamore Drive for 34 years. She's a retired elementary school principal. She has watched the street from her front porch for 3.5 decades, and she has seen things that she could name and things she could not name, and she has reported the things she could name and watched them disappear into the department's complaint process. And she has watched Officer Boyd Calloway work the corridor for 7 years. "You're the detective who got hit," Patricia says. "That's right. Come inside," she says. Marcus follows her into a house that smells like coffee and has stacks of books in the hallway. Patricia gestures for him to sit in the living room, and she goes to the kitchen and comes back with 2 cups of coffee without asking if he wants coffee, just providing it. "I've been expecting someone to come ask me questions," Patricia says. "I've been waiting for someone to take that street seriously enough to investigate it." "Tell me what you've seen," Marcus says. Patricia tells him that 7 years ago, Officer Calloway started appearing on Sycamore Drive with increasing frequency. She tells him that she noticed because she noticed everything on her street. It was her street in the way streets become yours when you've lived on them long enough. She tells him that Calloway would make stops, and the stops would be of black men, mostly young, mostly walking, and the stops would follow a pattern that Patricia recognized. He would position himself at that corner, she says, pointing out her window toward 12th Street. He would wait, not obviously, not sitting with his lights on, just parked, like he belonged there. And then he would watch the street, and when someone would walk past, specific people, I noticed, not just anyone, he would pull out and make contact. "Did you ever report what you saw?" "Multiple times," Patricia says. "I called the police department 3 times in the first 2 years. I filed complaints twice. I described exactly what I saw. The parking, the waiting, the targeting. You know what happened with those complaints?" Marcus doesn't answer because he already knows. Patricia has just told him. The complaints disappeared into the system. One was closed with a letter that said the department had reviewed my concerns and found no evidence of any violations of policy. Patricia says, "The other one I never got a response to at all, so I stopped reporting it. I watched it continue, but I stopped reporting it. I started keeping notes instead. I started writing down dates and times and descriptions." She goes to a desk in the corner of the living room and pulls out a notebook. It's a simple, spiral-bound notebook, the kind you buy in any drugstore for $3. The pages are filled with Patricia's handwriting. Dates, times, descriptions, Calloway's unit number, people's descriptions, the outcomes of stops, as far as Patricia could determine from watching them play out on the street. "The night you got hit," Patricia says, "I was on the porch. I saw him park. I saw him wait. I saw you walk past him. I saw him pull out and follow you. And then I heard the commotion, and I called 911, and I told them everything I saw." "What did you tell them?" "I told them that Officer Calloway was parked at that corner, and that he had been parked there for a long time, that he was waiting for something, and that when you walked past, he had followed you, and they needed to get someone to Sycamore Drive immediately." Patricia says, "I told them that this was not the first time I had seen this behavior on this street, and I told them the officer's unit number and his description." "What did they do?" "They took my statement," Patricia says. "And then they responded, and they found what they found, and nobody has asked me about any of it since." Marcus sits with Patricia for an hour and a half. They go through her notebook together. They talk about the dates and the times and the pattern. Patricia shows him specific entries where she notes Calloway positioning himself at the corner and then withdrawing without making contact, which tells Marcus that, on those days, nobody passed through that intersection who matched Calloway's criteria for a stop. When Marcus leaves Patricia's house, he's carrying in his head the testimony of a woman who has been watching this street and waiting for someone to believe her. Back in his office on Monday morning, Marcus pulls up the GPS data again. He looks at the 32 unlogged appearances. He maps them against Patricia's notebook. The dates match. The times match. The location matches perfectly. Patricia has been documenting the exact same pattern that the GPS data is documenting. What Marcus understands now is that Officer Boyd Calloway has been targeting Sycamore Drive systematically. He hasn't been targeting Marcus Cole specifically. He's been targeting everyone who walks through that corridor, and he's been doing it for 7 years. And the pattern has been documented and reported and closed with template language and dismissed and minimized until someone finally had enough authority to question it. But here's what matters most. The people who walked that street before Marcus didn't have an IA badge. They didn't have 15 years of experience in law enforcement. They didn't have the resources to investigate what happened to them. They had Patricia Vargas watching from her porch, writing things down in a notebook, hoping someone would eventually ask her about it. Marcus Cole had an IA badge. That changed everything. He pulls up his phone. He calls Sarah Mitchell. "I need you to cross-reference those 32 dates and locations with every incident report from that area in the same time period," Marcus says. "I need to know who was stopped in proximity to those locations when Calloway was parked there. And I need you to tell me if those people filed complaints." "That's going to be a lot of work," Sarah says. "I know," Marcus says. "Do it anyway." It takes Sarah 2 weeks. When she comes back to Marcus's office, she's carrying a file with 34 pages in it. 17 people, Sarah says, that we can identify. 17 stops in the vicinity of those coordinates on those dates. Of those 17, that 8 have incident reports. Of those 8, 3 filed complaints with the department. Of those 3, all 3 complaints were closed with template language. Marcus opens the file. The faces of 17 people stare back at him from the incident reports. 17 people who walked down Sycamore Drive and met Officer Boyd Calloway at the corner of 12th Street. 17 people whose records will now be part of an investigation that starts with Detective Marcus Cole getting hit with a golf club and includes everyone else who was there before him. 17 plus Marcus plus the documentation that Patricia Vargas has been keeping, plus Officer Jason Ruiz willing to tell the truth. The pattern is no longer anonymous. The pattern is no longer invisible. The pattern is now documented and real and sitting in a file on Marcus's desk. And it is a pattern of targeting based on race, geography, and calculated expectation about who belongs where. Rebecca Ortega works for the Atlanta Chronicle, and she has been working there for 12 years, which means she's been covering stories about police accountability for 12 years, which means she knows the difference between a story the department wants to tell and a story the department is going to try to bury. Marcus calls her on a Thursday evening when he's alone in his office, and he says, "I might have something for you, but I need you to understand what you're taking on." Rebecca agrees to meet him at a restaurant that's neutral ground, not too close to APD headquarters, and they sit at a table in the back, and Marcus tells her about Sycamore Drive, and Officer Boyd Calloway, and the GPS data, and Patricia Vargas's notebook. "You're going to need to verify everything independently," Marcus says, "because I can't be your source. I'm the investigator. Once you publish something, it becomes part of the record, and the moment it becomes part of the record, it changes what I can do officially." "So you're giving me the frame," Rebecca says, "and you're letting me build the picture." "That's right." Rebecca takes a notebook out of her bag. She's already pulling out names and asking for clarification about dates, and Marcus understands that she's been waiting for this kind of story for a long time. She's been waiting for evidence. She's been waiting for documentation that's specific enough that it can't be dismissed as anecdotal. "The GPS data," Rebecca says, "that's the core of this. Can you tell me how you got it?" "I can tell you that it arrived as an anonymous package," Marcus says. "I can tell you that it's been verified by the department's technical analyst. I can tell you that it contradicts the activity log that Officer Calloway filed." "Who sent the package?" "I don't know," Marcus says, "and I need to keep it that way. Someone inside the department has access to this data and the courage to pass it along. If I know who they are, I'm responsible for their safety." Rebecca understands this. She's been covering police stories long enough to know about the code of silence and what happens to people who break it. She takes down everything Marcus tells her. She asks questions about methodology and verification. She asks about the 17 people Marcus identified, and Marcus tells her he can't give her their names directly. But he can tell her that Patricia Vargas can talk about what she saw. "Patricia Vargas will talk to me?" Rebecca asks. "I think she will," Marcus says. "She's been watching that street for 34 years and waiting for someone to believe her. She's written everything down. She has documentation." It takes Rebecca 3 weeks to report the story. She interviews Patricia Vargas on her front porch and takes notes on the notebook entries. She calls the police department and asks for a statement about Officer Boyd Calloway's activity on Sycamore Drive and about the GPS data that contradicts his activity logs. The police department gives her a statement that says the department takes all allegations seriously and that they are aware of the allegations against Officer Calloway and that they are conducting a review. What they don't do is confirm the GPS data. What they don't do is acknowledge the anonymous package. What they don't do is answer specific questions about the 32 unlogged appearances. Rebecca publishes her story on a Sunday morning, and the headline reads, "GPS data reveals years of targeting on City Street. Investigation of Millhaven officers' conduct raises questions about who belongs where." The story runs on the front page of the local section. It includes Patricia Vargas's name and her photograph on her porch. It includes a description of the GPS data and how it contradicts the officer's official reports. It includes quotes from Patricia about what she saw and what she reported and what happened when she reported it. It includes the information that Detective Marcus Cole was assaulted on August 15th by the officer in question, and that the assault occurred in the context of a stop that the GPS data suggests was part of a pattern of targeting. The story goes viral on social media within 3 hours. By Monday morning, The entire department knows that there's an active investigation into Officer Calloway's conduct, and they know about the GPS data, and they know that there's a detective in internal affairs who has been working this case. By Tuesday morning, Captain Glenn Harmon calls Marcus into his office. Harmon is 55 years old. He's been with the Millhaven Police Department for 28 years. He's Calloway's supervisor. He's the man who has personally signed off on closing 6 of Calloway's excessive force complaints. Harmon's office is decorated with commendations and citations, and he sits at his desk with his hands folded, and he says, "You need to understand what you're doing to this department. I'm investigating alleged violations of policy," Marcus says. "You're destroying an officer's reputation," Harmon says. "You're letting a newspaper run a story that suggests patterns and targeting without proof." "The GPS data is proof," Marcus says. "The GPS data shows where a vehicle was parked," Harmon says. "It doesn't show intent. It doesn't show targeting. It shows that an officer sat in his vehicle for periods of time. That's not illegal. He was parked for 25 minutes on a street where he'd parked 31 other times in patterns that coincide with stops of black men," Marcus says. "That's targeting. That's a detective reading intention into data," Harmon says. "And that detective used to be a patrol officer himself, so that detective might be looking at this through a particular lens." What Harmon has just done is suggest that Marcus is investigating this case because of his own race, because of his own position as a black man in the department, because of some bias that comes from his perspective. What Harmon has just done is delegitimize the investigation through personal attack. "With all due respect, sir, the data is what the data is," Marcus says. "The data needs to be interpreted carefully," Harmon says. "And the interpretation of that data should not prejudge the officer's motivation or intention." "The stops are documented," Marcus says. 8 incident reports, 3 formal complaints, all of them closed with template language that you signed off on. This gets Harmon's attention. His hands unfold. He leans forward. "You reviewing my closure decisions?" "I'm reviewing all closure decisions that relate to Officer Calloway's conduct," Marcus says. "Those closures were made following standard departmental procedure," Harmon says. "And those closures determined that the officer's conduct was consistent with policy." "The procedures need examining," Marcus says. "That's part of what an investigation does." Marcus leaves Harmon's office, understanding that he's just placed himself on the wrong side of the department's internal politics. Harmon is not going to help him. Harmon is not going to make this investigation easier. Harmon is going to protect his own decisions. And that protection is going to extend to protecting the officer whose conduct those decisions authorized. But Marcus was prepared for this. What he wasn't prepared for is what happens at his house on Wednesday night. The call comes at 2 a.m. Diana is asleep. Layla is asleep. Marcus is asleep. The phone rings and Marcus answers, and a voice on the other end says, "You need to stop what you're doing. You need to stop investigating Officer Calloway, and you need to stop talking to the newspaper, and you need to stop putting the department's business in public, because if you don't, we're going to know where you live, and we're going to know what your family looks like, and things are going to start getting very specific and very personal." Marcus doesn't respond. He hangs up. He calls the number back, but it's a spoofed line. He considers calling his supervisor. He considers filing a report. Instead, he sits in the dark of his living room and he thinks about what it means to have someone tell you that they know where your family lives. In the morning, Diana finds him in the backyard with cold coffee. The sun is coming up. Diana has already gotten Layla ready for school. She sits down next to him on the porch steps. "Did something happen?" she asks. Marcus tells her about the call. He tells her about the threat. He tells her what they said. Diana doesn't cry. She doesn't yell. She doesn't tell him to stop. What she does is say, "Can you protect us while you finish this?" It's a simple question. It's the most important question. And Marcus understands that it's not a request to quit. It's a statement of trust with a condition attached. Keep going, but keep them safe. "Yes," Marcus says. "I can do that." He calls the number back later that day. He contacts the FBI. He files an official complaint about the threatening call. He documents everything. He tells Diana to vary her routine, to not follow patterns, to be aware of everything around her. He arranges for an officer to do occasional drive-bys of the house. He talks to his neighbors and tells them that if they see anything unusual, anything at all, they should call him immediately. And then he goes back to work. The filing happens 2 weeks later. Marcus files a formal complaint against Officer Boyd Calloway, alleging patterns of racial targeting, illegal stops, and falsification of official reports. He files a complaint against Captain Glenn Harmon, alleging patterns of improper closure, of excessive force complaints, and failure to investigate allegations of officer misconduct. He files a formal request for an audit of all stops made by Officer Calloway on Sycamore Drive in the past 7 years. He files it all at once, on a Thursday morning, and by that afternoon, the newspaper has been called and the story is being prepared for publication, and the entire department knows. The city council hearing is scheduled for 6 weeks after Marcus files his complaint. The council chamber is packed. Every seat is filled. People are standing in the back. This is the public moment where the evidence gets presented, where the complaints get heard, where Officer Boyd Calloway has to sit and listen to his own conduct being described by people whose lives his conduct affected. Marcus is invited to testify. Patricia Vargas is invited to testify. Officer Jason Ruiz is there, sitting in civilian clothes, waiting to be called. The 17 people who were stopped on Sycamore Drive have been contacted, and 9 of them have shown up. They're sitting in the back, watching. The council president is a woman named Sandra Williams. She's 52 years old. She's been on the council for 6 years. She starts the hearing by stating the purpose: to examine allegations of racial targeting and improper conduct by Officer Boyd Calloway, and to review the department's procedures for investigating and closing complaints. Captain Glenn Harmon is there. Sitting in the front row, Officer Boyd Calloway is there, sitting next to his lawyer, a man named Donald Crawford, who has defended 17 police officers in the past 8 years and who represents the police union. Marcus is called first. He stands and walks to the podium. He brings his notes. He looks out at the council and he speaks clearly and without emotion. "My name is Detective Marcus Cole," he says. "I work for the Atlanta Police Department's Internal Affairs Division. I've been in law enforcement for 15 years. I'm here today to present evidence of a pattern of conduct by Officer Boyd Calloway that suggests racial targeting and improper stops." He walks through the GPS data. He presents the 32 unlogged appearances. He shows the map of coordinates and dates. He presents the 8 incident reports, and the 3 formal complaints that were closed with template language. He talks about the pattern of stops that cluster on specific times and specific days, and he explains the mathematical probability of that clustering occurring randomly. What the data shows, he says, is that Officer Calloway parked at specific locations on Sycamore Drive with unusual frequency. What the incident reports show is that these parking sessions coincided with stops of black men, mostly young, mostly walking. What the template language used to close complaints shows is that these stops were repeatedly determined to be consistent with policy, despite the evidence suggesting they were specifically targeted based on race. Crawford asks him questions designed to suggest that GPS data is ambiguous, that parked vehicles don't prove intent, that Marcus might be interpreting the evidence to fit a predetermined narrative. Marcus answers each question with specific reference to the data. He doesn't get defensive. He doesn't suggest that Crawford's questions are illegitimate. He just presents the facts. Patricia Vargas is called next. She walks to the podium slowly. She's not carrying any notes. She states her name. She states how long she's lived on Sycamore Drive. Then she tells the council exactly what she told the 911 dispatcher the night Marcus was hit. On August 15th, at approximately 3:47 p.m., Officer Boyd Calloway's police vehicle pulled into the corner of Sycamore Drive and 12th Street, Patricia says, in exactly the same words she used on 911. He parked his vehicle and remained stationary with the engine running. At approximately 4:12 p.m., a male walked past his vehicle on the sidewalk. Upon observation of this male, Officer Calloway pulled out from his parking spot and initiated contact with him. I observed the officer approach the male in a manner that suggested the stop was not a routine traffic stop, but rather a targeting of the individual for unknown reasons. I remained on my porch and observed the male produce identification. I observed the officer make comments to the male that I could not hear clearly from my location. I observed the officer directing the male to move and the male refusing and stating that he had done nothing wrong. I observed the officer physically engage with the male. And I observed the male striking the officer with an object, at which point I called 911. She says this without notes. She says it in exactly the same words she used when she called the dispatcher. The council members are listening. Crawford has no questions for her. He knows what questions would be, and he knows that Patricia Vargas will answer them with the same careful precision that she used to construct her initial testimony. She sits down. Officer Jason Ruiz is called as a witness for the investigation. He provides testimony about Calloway's comments regarding Sycamore Drive and the way Calloway talks about the corridor as if he owns it. He talks about the language Calloway uses to describe people who walk through that area, and he talks about the assumptions Calloway makes about who belongs on that street. In conversations, Officer Calloway has indicated that he views Sycamore Drive as a corridor that connects neighborhoods that should remain separate, Ruiz testifies. He has indicated that his role is to prevent movement through that corridor by people who, in his judgment, do not belong in the receiving neighborhood. He has used language about this that suggests the stops are not based on observed violations of law, but rather on assumptions about the person being stopped based on their race. Crawford's cross-examination of Ruiz focuses on whether Ruiz can distinguish between Calloway's personal opinions and Calloway's official conduct, whether Ruiz is offering hearsay, whether Ruiz is reinterpreting language said in private conversations to fit a narrative of targeting. Ruiz handles it the way someone handles it who knows the cost of telling the truth and has decided to pay it. He says yes when he can verify something through personal observation. He says he heard Officer Calloway say those words when asked what Calloway said. He doesn't get angry. He doesn't defend Ruiz. He just answers. Then Officer Boyd Calloway is asked to testify. Calloway stands and walks to the podium. He's wearing his uniform. He looks calm. He looks like someone who has been through this process before and has always come out fine. He provides his account of the August 15th incident. He says he was conducting routine patrol on Sycamore Drive when he observed Marcus walking and made a decision to conduct a stop based on certain behavioral indicators he observed. He says that when he approached Marcus became belligerent. He says that Marcus refused to cooperate with a lawful order. He says that the use of force was necessary to protect himself. Crawford asks him about the GPS data. Calloway says that the GPS data shows where the unit was parked, but it doesn't show what he was doing while parked. He says he was conducting surveillance of the area. He says that surveillance is a normal part of police work. Is the surveillance documented in your activity report? Marcus's supervisor, Lieutenant Jerome Mitchell, asks from the council table. It's routine patrol, Calloway says. Is it documented as surveillance or as patrol? It's patrol, Calloway says. But the GPS data shows your vehicle was stationary. Patrol often involves stationary observation, Calloway says. You made 3 stops in the past year on Sycamore Drive that were not documented in your activity report, Lieutenant Mitchell says. 3 separate incidents where the GPS data shows your unit was stationary in a specific location, and then records indicate a stop was made, but no incident report is filed. Crawford objects to the characterization. But Calloway has to answer. I may not have filed reports on every contact, Calloway says. Some contacts are just informal warnings. 3 contacts that are not in any official record, Lieutenant Mitchell says. 3 instances where people were stopped, but no documentation exists except the GPS data showing where and when. Can you explain that? This is the moment. This is where Calloway's careful responses start to crack. He says, sometimes we conduct stops that don't warrant formal documentation. Based on what criteria? Lieutenant Mitchell asks. Officer judgment, Calloway says. Officer judgment about what? Calloway pauses. He's looking at his lawyer. His lawyer is looking back at him. And Calloway understands, in that moment, that he's been given a very specific instruction. Do not finish that sentence. Whether formal documentation is necessary, Calloway says finally. So you exercise discretion over who gets documented in the record and who doesn't. Yes, Calloway says. And that discretion is exercised based on what factors? Calloway doesn't answer immediately. He looks out at the council. He looks at the 17 people sitting in the back who were stopped on his street. He looks at Patricia Vargas, who is watching him with the same clear-eyed observation she brought to her porch. He starts to say something. His lips move. The words start to come out, and Marcus leans forward because he knows what's about to happen. Calloway is about to say something about where these people should or should not be. Calloway is about to say something about race. Calloway is about to say something that confirms everything. But Calloway's lawyer puts his hand on Calloway's arm, and Calloway stops. The sentence doesn't finish. The words don't come out. The silence is louder than anything he could have said. Lieutenant Mitchell doesn't press. He knows what almost happened. He knows what Calloway was about to say. A call. He knows that the moment of breaking didn't produce words. But it produced something else. The visible moment where Calloway understands that he's been caught, and that the template language is not going to be sufficient this time, and that his discretion over who gets documented is exactly the problem, and that the problem is about to have consequences. The hearing ends after 6 hours. The council votes to recommend that the police department's internal investigation of Officer Calloway be completed within 30 days, and that the results be made public. The council votes to recommend a full audit of all stops made by Officer Calloway in the past 7 years. The council votes to recommend an examination of the department's complaint closure procedures. What they don't do is fire Calloway. What they don't do is make an immediate determination. What they do is create a timeline and a set of public expectations that the investigation will be thorough and the results will be published. As people are leaving the council chamber, Officer Jason Ruiz catches Marcus in the hallway. "Thank you for that," Ruiz says. "For what?" Marcus asks. "For asking me to tell the truth," Ruiz says. "I needed someone to ask." He walks away before Marcus can respond. The department's internal investigation takes exactly 30 days. When it concludes, on a Thursday afternoon, the results are made public in a document that runs to 47 pages and includes the recommendation that Officer Boyd Calloway be terminated. The investigation determines that Calloway engaged in racial targeting. It determines that Calloway falsified activity reports. It determines that Calloway made undocumented stops. It determines that the GPS data was not consistent with Calloway's official record of his activities on August 15th, and that this discrepancy, combined with the pattern of discrepancies across 7 years, suggests intentional deception. Captain Glenn Harmon's investigation also concludes that Harmon failed in his supervisory responsibilities by closing excessive force complaints without proper investigation, by using template language that prevented actual review of the allegations, and by not questioning the frequency of complaints against an officer under his supervision. Harmon is reassigned to a desk job pending further investigation. Calloway is fired. When Calloway clears out his locker on a Friday morning, he doesn't say goodbye to anyone. He doesn't acknowledge the changes his conduct has produced. He just leaves. The 17 people who were stopped on Sycamore Drive are contacted by the department's victim support unit. They're offered the opportunity to file formal complaints. 7 of them do. Their complaints are processed by a new investigator, not Harmon, and this time the language is different. This time the complaints are treated as legitimate allegations that deserve investigation. This time the responses are not template language. Officer Jason Ruiz is initially placed on night shift, which everyone understands as punishment for cooperating with the investigation. But after 2 months, he's moved back to day shift. He's no longer partnered with anyone. He's made solo patrol assignments while the department figures out what to do with him. When Marcus sees him at a roll call 3 months after the hearing, they make eye contact but don't acknowledge each other. They don't need to. The work is done. The Atlanta Chronicle publishes a follow-up story that includes interviews with 5 of the 17 people who were stopped. The story quotes them talking about what it felt like to be stopped based on appearance, based on location, based on Officer Calloway's judgment about where they should or should not be. The story includes the detail that one of the 17 people filed a complaint after his stop in 2019, and that complaint was closed with template language by Captain Harmon in 2020, and that person has never received any notification that the complaint is now being reinvestigated. The story is brutal in its simplicity. It's not outraged. It's not written with dramatic language. It just presents the facts. People were stopped. They reported it. The reports were closed without investigation. And that closure meant that nobody was accountable until Marcus Cole got hit with a golf club. Marcus gets called into his supervisor's office the day the follow-up story publishes. Lieutenant Jerome Mitchell is the supervisor, and Mitchell has been the one asking the hard questions at the hearing. And Mitchell has been the one recommending that investigations be opened instead of closed. "You did good work," Mitchell says. "I want you to know that. You did the thing that IA is supposed to do, and you did it despite resistance. There are still things that need to happen," Marcus says. "The department needs to look at its procedures. The template language needs to change. The way complaints are closed needs to be audited." "Those things are going to happen," Mitchell says. "Not because I want them to or because you want them to, but because the federal government is now looking at the department, and the federal government is going to require those things as conditions of the investigation. You've created the conditions where change becomes mandatory instead of optional." "That doesn't feel like enough," Marcus says. "It isn't," Mitchell says. "But it's more than there was before. That's the math we work with in this job. It's never enough, but it's always more than before." Marcus leaves the office understanding that he's been given permission to not feel like he's accomplished something complete. The investigation is complete. The hearing is complete. The firing is complete. But the work of changing the system, the work of preventing the next Callaway from operating for 7 years, the work of making sure that people who walk on Sycamore Drive are not targeted by whoever replaces Callaway in that unit, that work is ongoing. He goes back to his desk. He opens the file on his computer that contains the list of 17 people. He pulls up the complaint records for each of them. He starts the process of making sure that their complaints are being properly investigated now, that the reopening of those complaints is documented, that the people themselves know that their allegations are being taken seriously. It's administrative work. No, it's not dramatic. It doesn't generate headlines, but it's the work that actually changes things. It's the work that makes sure the system performs differently the next time. 3 weeks after Callaway is fired, Marcus is walking home from work when his phone buzzes. It's a text message from Patricia Vargas. "Thank you for asking me to remember," the text says. Marcus doesn't know how Patricia got his personal number. He doesn't ask. He just responds with, "Thank you for remembering." He keeps walking. October comes. The federal investigation into the department begins. The audit of the complaint closure procedures begins. The review of all stops made by Officer Callaway begins. The temperature drops. The heat breaks. Georgia in fall is something you notice only because the summer is finally over. Marcus is home for dinner on a Tuesday night, and Layla asks him how work is going, and he tells her that work is going fine, that they're making progress on something important. Layla doesn't ask what the something important is. She just nods and goes back to eating her pasta. After dinner, Marcus is clearing the table when Layla follows him into the kitchen. "Dad?" she says. "Yeah? Are you winning?" He sets down the plate he's holding. He looks at his daughter. She's 10 years old now, just turned 10 2 weeks ago. She's not the 9-year-old who painted Neptune the wrong shade of blue anymore. But she's still the same person, the one who figures things out on her own terms and then explains why her way is better. "Some things," he says. "Callaway's going to be prosecuted. The department is under federal investigation. 17 more people are in the record now who weren't before." "That sounds like winning," Layla says. "Parts of it are. Some parts are still happening, and some parts I can't fix. The people who got stopped before me and didn't have what I had. I can't undo that." Layla thinks about this for a long moment. She's very still, very quiet. The way she gets when she's thinking about something serious. "But you made it better for the next person," she says. Marcus stops. He sets down the bowl he's been holding. He looks at his daughter, and he realizes that she understands something that it took him 15 years to learn. "I made it more documented," Marcus says. "Which is what I know how to do." Layla nods seriously. She's satisfied with this answer. "Can I see the badge?" she asks. Marcus takes his IA badge from his jacket. It's gold, 7-pointed star, IA written across the center. He places it on the kitchen table in front of her. Layla picks it up. She holds it in both hands. She reads the letters on it carefully, sounding them out even though she knows what they say. She holds it up to the light. She examines the back of it. She looks at the weight of it in her hands. She puts it back on the table. "Okay," she says simply. She picks up her fork and goes back to dinner. Marcus picks up the badge and puts it back in his jacket pocket. He sits down at the table across from his daughter and he picks up his own fork. He's still working. That is the answer. Not a victory, not a completion, not a moment of triumph or vindication. The ongoing specific work of the person who is still here, still at the table, still in the record. He picks up his fork and he finishes dinner with his daughter. Saturday morning, October. The heat has broken completely now. Georgia in fall is something you notice only because the summer is finally over. Marcus on Sycamore Drive. Walking, not from the golf course. He walked here from the parking lot 2 blocks east because he wanted to walk the route again. Not to commemorate anything, just to see what it looks like now. It looks like a street. Oak trees, sprinklers, a dog behind a fence. The normal sounds of a Saturday morning in a residential neighborhood. It looks exactly the way it looked on August 15th before anything happened, which is exactly the way it looked before Marcus was born, which is exactly the way it will look after he's gone. He passes the spot where he was hit. He doesn't slow down. He knows where it is. He's been past it 3 times since the incident, always with his head down, always moving through it. Today he keeps walking at the same pace he's been walking at for the entire route, neither faster nor slower, just present. He passes Patricia Vargas's house. Her porch is empty. The rocking chair is still there, but Patricia is probably inside at her kitchen table with her coffee and her notebook, recording whatever she sees. Marcus raises a hand in the direction of her window, even though he can't see her and she can't see him. It seems like the right thing to do. He reaches Diana's sister Carmen's house. He rings the doorbell. Diana answers immediately, like she's been waiting for him. "I walked," he says. "I can see that." She steps back from the door. "Come in, Layla's here. She's been arguing with me about Neptune for 20 minutes. "What's the argument?" "Whether 3rd place is a moral victory or just 3rd place." Marcus comes inside. She'll argue herself around to the same answer she always argues herself to, which is that the thing she did was the right version of the thing, and the judges were wrong. Diana closes the door. She gets that from somewhere. Marcus doesn't answer this. He goes inside, later, walking home, the full route this time. Sycamore Drive, all the way. He thinks about the 32 unlogged GPS appearances. The FBI will have a count by the end of next week. Whatever the count is, there will be a number attached to it, and the number will be in a federal document, and the document will be in the record. He cannot fix the past. He can document it. He can make sure the next Callaway encounter carries the specific weight of a record that does not use template language. He can make sure the next person who walks this street, if that next person is stopped, if that next person does everything right and is harmed anyway, has more to point to than they did 6 weeks ago. Not enough, never quite enough, but more than before. He walks home. The street is just a street. October sun. The first real cool of it. He is still here. He is still working. For now. That is what there is.